From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's the Season 4 premiere of Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Cecily Bum Trinket.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a hint of a clue to a hint, whatever it is you were thinking when you got your 12-year-old a drum kit for Christmas and let him set it up in his bedroom. Anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now here's your host, starting the new season with fresh eyes and fresh ears, not all of which are in autopsy reports, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. We keep making each other laugh and then we mess up our intro. So
that's okay. That's what the idea is, right?
Well, sort of.
You're supposed to try to make me...
Yeah.
I know what you said and I know what it's from, but you're going to have to explain, because I am not going to explain this. You're going to have to do it.
You shouldn't. Yeah. It's not for you. So...
Oh, God.
Yeah, a good way to start off the new year.
Yeah.
Oddly, last year, apparently the first episode I discussed bikini waxing and anal bleaching. And then the first episode, and the first episode of this new year, I,
Yes.
Yeah. So I did want to recommend a wonderful Netflix series. It's short, it's sweet, it's funny, it's weird. It's called The History of Swear Words. And it's hosted by Nicolas Cage. At first I thought, what the actual fuck is happening?
Yeah,
but he's actually kind of the perfect person.
It's magnificent.
It's weird. So there's six swear words they pick. The episodes are only 20 minutes each. And it's funny, but it's insightful and thoughtful and historical. And I can say anything. As if you've listened to this podcast, you probably know that I can say anything.
She has said all of the words in
Let
me finish.
Okay.
She has said all of the words that are in this series except one. Which is the one she stumbled into at the beginning of this podcast.
And that's a very apt way to describe it, stumbled into. So I can't say the P word. I don't know what it is. I do know what it is. It's the S's. It's like it, makes it snaky or sneaky or I don't know, but I can't stand that word. I find it, I like the C word. I got no problem with that. Like perhaps it's my British heritage coming through that I have no problem saying the C word.
Well, you're always, every once in a while, you call somebody, a woman you don't like very much, a cunt with a Q.
Yeah. Spell it with a Q. That's when they're like a next level cunt, is when they're with the Q. However, I can't say the P. I know. I like kitties and, kittens. I just can't say the P word. So in the 1600s, apparently... a wonderful nickname for the vagina was Cecily Bum Trinket. And the breakdown of the etymology is really hilarious. I won't go into it, but let's just say I find the whole thing interesting. So it also meant a lot to me because thank you for you sweet tipsters who have asked how my hand surgery went. It, was in December. It went fine. It's been a month now. My finger still isn't straight, but my palm has a tiny angry vagina.
A little Cecily Bum Trinket.
Cecily Bum Trinket on my hand. And it'll heal eventually. I overheal. I develop keloids. So it looks like a little tiny angry hand vagina right on my heart line. And that doesn't mean I can now charge extra for hand jobs. It just is a scar that hopefully will.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Mark is happy about the hand job, price guide still being the 2020 prices, even though we're in 2021. So it'll be fine. It's not, I think it's going to be there forever, but who cares? It's my palm. I don't do a lot of palm modeling, so it's fine. But vagina has been, on my hands and on my mind. So Cecily Bum Trinket was really funny. And then doing just a cursory search, there is a troupe that hires out different, type of entertainment for parties. And there's Cecily Bum Trinket and Madame Ovary, who will show up to your party dressed in powdered wigs and poofy skirts and help you find eligible men. I just can't even.
What?
Cecily Bum Trinket and Madame Ovary.
And they will help you find eligible men?
Well, I think it's kind of a joke. Like, do you remember when we went to that party and there was someone dressed as Austin Powers? Remember, it was like the Mike's 60th birthday party or something?
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it's like an entertainment type thing you can hire for a party, which is hilarious. So, they have like little moles drawn on their face and big powdered wigs and big skirts, and they're on like stilts, it looks like. But yeah, so there's a Cecily Bum Trinket and Madame Ovary if you need to hire someone from the 1600s.
Oh my God.
For your kid's 6th birthday party. I'm kidding. Don't do it.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Right. So if you have a chance, if you subscribe to Netflix, I cannot recommend The History of Swear Words enough. And they, it's sort of, the reviews are like, well, they hit their, apex with Dick. And describing, how through history that became, what it was. And I was like, that's a good one, but I'm still stuck on Damn.
Right,
I thought Damn, I think it's the final episode, was really interesting. Like the least, quote unquote, least offensive word from the list, which if you listen to this podcast, you've heard all the others once or twice or 100 times. But Damn, I thought Damn, the evolution of Damn was really interesting. I really and I had no idea what a big deal it was in 1939 in Gone with the Wind. That it was a huge deal. That
it was the first. Little nail in the coffin of the Hays Code.
Right. That's what I'm saying. This is such a. It's short, it's sweet, it's informative, it's weird, it's funny, and it's fascinating, the history of swear words in this little series. And you wonder how the shit gets put together. Like, someone, they have authors who've written books. I've ordered both books from the authors that are listed, and one is coming soon and one isn't coming until like March, maybe because of reprints. One is called like Holy Shit, the history of swear words or something.
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, I ordered both books.
So you love the series so much that you went.
Well, I love words.
Yeah.
I love the origin of words. I've loved words my whole life. I remember, managing a comedy club and my staff revolting against me when I used the word smarmy to describe a salesman who had come to sell, I don't know if it was like drink machines or something for the kitchen
great
staff.
Great word, though.
I love smarmy. And they were like, that's not a word. And I'm like, yes, it is. And they would like make fun of me and go, is that guy swarmy? And I'm like, swarmy is bees. Smarmy is the word. They just thought I pulled a word out of my ass.
Did you go get a dictionary and show them?
Yeah, it is a word, and it's my favorite. Smarmy is my favorite word. But so yeah, I love the history of words. I love etymology with all of my heart, and hearing some of these things were fascinating. The changes, the importance over the years, the fads where they have come into fashion and gone out of fashion, and how they've changed, how they become part of popular culture, whether it's in music or in art, in poetry. It's amazing. It's a really fun little show. So Cecily Bum Trinket is how we start off 2021, which I can't think of a better way than.
Yeah, let's.
Were you going to say let's get into Cecily Bum Trinket?
I was going to say let's plunge right into the 4th season.
You're fired, dad jokes. You are fired. We're not plunging into Cecily Bum Trinket.
We're going to thrust into this new year.
Oh, this is not happening.
All right, I'm shutting up. I'm shutting up. I'm shutting up.
Producer Mark's invisible. La 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 la. Okay. So I do also have to thank. It's sort of odd to me that we're on the Apple True Crime podcast charts in Brazil, Denmark, and India. I can't thank you enough for your amazing support. India has just like shot out of a cannon.
Yeah, and we think that's because of
Ghana.
because of Ghana,
Yeah.
which is a music, and it's like an iTunes.
Yeah.
That is very big in that part of the world.
It's the Apple podcast of India.
We've jumped up in Pakistan and Bangladesh. And
it's very interesting to me. It's the second most popular country after the U.S. I'm always shocked. But yeah, they've even taken over Australia, which has been infinitely supportive of us, and we're grateful to that too. But it just was like boom, like right out of the cannon. So we're on the true crime podcast charts in Brazil, Denmark, and India, and I can't thank you enough because, Lord knows I don't know who I'd have to kill or blow or Cecily Mum Trinket to get on the charts in the U.S. But whatever, or use my hand vagina.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let's stop now.
Okay.
Let's.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry.
Next.
Right. Next. So next is thank you to two amazing listeners who left new reviews. One is entitled, her name, I say her, as I hate the review process, which made me laugh till I hurt myself. And the other name was What News. And they are both lovely 5-star reviews. And I'm very sorry that What News is having trouble sleeping because she or he has discovered the podcast and is binge listening. So please take time to sleep. Sleep is important. It's how we restore our bodies. So.
There's a cure for that. You need to tell 20 friends about the podcast, and then you'll feel so much better. And
you're the marketing genius, my friend. You're the marketing genius. Yeah, we appreciate the word of mouth through our beautiful Tip-Sters. We really, have the best, most amazing listeners. We're very, very blessed and grateful. And with that, the winner of the 2020 Page a Day True Crime Calendar is Miss Stephanie from Texas. And we had more entrants in this contest than any contest we've ever done. I had a whole baseball hat filled with people's names, and I spent time ripping every piece of paper so that everyone's name was the same on the same size paper, so nothing would feel bigger or stick out more during the drawing process. And I pulled Miss Stephanie out, and she will be getting her Page a Day calendar sent to her as soon as possible. I messaged her and said, if not today, then on Monday for sure, but we will get it to her as quick as possible. And how kind our listeners are, the people that entered that did not win are commenting and saying congratulations. So that's really sweet, because I'd be like, fuck her, I wanted that fucking calendar. But you guys are so thoughtful and kind, you're not like me. So that's a lovely thing. So that'll be a good way to start off the new year for Miss Stephanie. She'll get her Page a Day True Crime Calendar, and and I'm sure we'll have another contest soon.
Oh, I'm sure we'll have something else to give away.
I was going to say something. I'll shut up now. So yeah,
Thank you.
I know. I'm sorry. You have created a 12-year-old boy. It was always there. The 12-year-old boy was always there.
You're the one that named this podcast, darling.
You are right. You're right. I'm standing in my truth and
have
taking
made me
all
more
credit.
of a 12-year-old boy than I ever was before.
I have brought you back. So here I am accusing you, and it's really me turning you into a 12-year-old boy. So this episode was suggested to us by Tipster Jennifer from the tri-state area. And I, as usual, feeling a little like my head's in a closet, I was unaware of this case. And I do know another podcast covered it a few months ago. We have different styles. So the Trail Went Cold covered this podcast, and I am covering it also. And I usually don't like to do that, especially if it's very close to the time that another podcast has covered it. But we have different styles and different ways of doing it. So I think you'll get information out of both that is different and unique about this case. And it's so overwhelming. I warned producer Mark, I'm like, look, there's a lot to unpack here. It's different than a typical case of a missing child. It's just weird in ways I can't explain. It's emotional. Obviously, a child is still missing, but it's very odd what happened in the legal system. And it feels to me like detectives just wouldn't give up, and they wanted to make sure someone I don't want to say paid for this, but that something was done, and it wasn't enough, as you will see, and it may have been not correct, but it certainly isn't because they didn't spend the time and the effort to try and get all the details right. And when you're dealing with a suspect that is so problematic, whether it's drugs or alcohol or a narcissism that makes you change your story and lie and want to be involved and then deny being involved. This is a very layered and circuitous case, but it is the case of Erica Baker. And if you live in the tri-state area, you may be familiar with the case. It's Kettering, Ohio is kind of a suburb of Dayton, but it's also, like north of Cincinnati. I was very familiar with Kettering when I managed a comedy club in Cincinnati because a couple of my staff members lived there and drove, down the freeway towards Cincinnati to work at the comedy club. So it's a suburb, and while it is closer to Dayton, it's sort of a midway point between Cincy and Dayton, Kettering is, and that is where Erica lived. And she had in her, 9, almost 10 years, assuming that she is no longer with us, and we don't have any proof, but we do have an assumption that she's no longer with us. She had I don't want to say difficult life, but, we all have family secrets. We all have families that may not have, been the most stable, and some of us have it harder than others. And I know that no matter how difficult things were in her life, she was very, very loved by both of her parents, no matter what happened. So let's get into this. Erica Nicole Baker was 9, not quite 10 years old, a few months from her 10th birthday. And she really spent most of her time with her father, Greg Baker. Now, her father and her mother, Misty Baker, had been separated, and I think the divorce actually might have been final by then. It took 3 years, and that happens a lot. You don't have the money to pay for an attorney. You stay, legally separated, but, the divorce isn't final for a while. So that, they were divorced. And I believe Greg had the majority of the custody because Misty found herself involved in the world of drugs. She was a busy mother of 3. She had 2 older sons, and then she had Erica. And she was working and supporting them and making a good living. And Greg was a blue-collar worker, which did not embarrass him, but he felt hampered. He had a head injury as a child and felt that it made him a slow learner and that he wasn't ever going to get the kind of jobs that he wanted to support his family. And he wanted his children to know that this is what happens and that you need an education. I mean, he was such a concerned father that his kids have a different life than he had, that he took his children one at a time to work with him one day each so they could see when he was working at a hardware store that he had to lift heavy bags and move them, and that he felt he was smart and could contribute more, but his education, his lack of education, and his learning disability was going to keep him in jobs like this that were not going to allow him to progress to where he thought he could or he should, and he just didn't want his children to do that. So he, while Misty, and they got married very young, I think they were 18 and 20, and while Misty, was a good mother until she, got involved in drugs, Greg was a wonderful father, having no experience being a dad, but, wanted to raise his kids in a way that was different than his life. So, I mean, it's a troubled childhood, but she was so very loved, and she had extended family that cared about her. It wasn't like she was some child out on the street. And she had most of her time was spent with her father in a more stable environment. So what had happened on February 7th of 1999 is that Greg, her father, had dropped her back off at her mother's home on a Saturday, and Erica was bored. So she had helped her family do some things around the house and then asked her mother, who was crocheting, by the way, if she could go to a friend's home. So she had actually gone to 2 different friends' home and neither were home. And she came back home and then said to her mother, "Can I walk my aunt's dog, the little Shih Tzu? Can I walk my aunt's dog?" And her mother was like, "Well, no, it's raining." And she said, "Well, I'll wear a raincoat and I'll make sure she's protected." So Erica leaves her home, and we have such a tight timeline here. It's just, I know this case is solvable. And you can find a lot of great information about Erica Nicole Baker's case in the Dayton Daily News and the Cincinnati Enquirer. You can find a lot of great information, and about the eventual, suspect's legal case, Christian Gabriel. You can find a lot about his case in legal tomes across the internet. He's something else. So she leaves home at around 3:15. We really have it narrowed down to an hour, like between 3 and 4 in the afternoon on February 7th, out in public at a recreation center, the Kettering Recreation Center, which was very popular and well-known and safe, and a place you wouldn't worry about your 9-year-old daughter walking a dog. None of this should have happened. So Erica leaves the home wearing, and here's something that's going to come up later that's going to be debated, a pink Winnie the Pooh sweatshirt, pale blue jeans, white sneakers, and they had purple inserts, which is very smart to include because, as we know with a missing person, sometimes the things that are found that last the longest are shoes. And that's because of the soles being rubber. They're not typically cotton. Even if they are, the soles remain. Shoes are a very good lead, a very good piece of evidence, a very good indicator that someone was there. So she had on her Winnie the Pooh sweatshirt, jeans, white sneakers, and a pink raincoat. And the little Shih Tzu had a leash, a blue leash. And she's this really quite stunningly beautiful little girl, like 3'11", 65 pounds, blonde hair. She has a scar on the inner arch of one of her feet. Her ears were pierced. She's 9 years old, so her front teeth are a little bit crooked at the time. And she has an oval-shaped, tan-colored birthmark the size of a dime on one of her hips. So you may see some news reports that spell her name Erika, but it's Erica, Erica Nicole Baker. So she leaves her home with her aunt's Shih Tzu. So 2 witnesses who are walking their dog, a couple walking their dog around the pond, find the little Shih Tzu shaking wet and cold and dragging its leash in a shelter on the recreational center property. They get the little dog to run up to them, and they call animal control because they didn't realize that they had already seen Erica and the dog, and they didn't know she was missing. Apparently there wasn't information on the tag of how to take the dog home to Erica's aunt. So they take the dog to animal control, and then they turn on the news later that night, which, by the way, I'm not sure I've ever seen, except other maybe in the Delphi case, a town mobilize the way they did when Erica went missing. I mean, they were on it very quickly, and you just don't hear about that often. So Misty becomes concerned because Erica's not coming home, and it's now getting dark, and she knows she would never be gone after dark. So she calls the police. The police show up and take a report. They have it on the 11 p.m. news, By 8 o'clock that night, they are combing the park, doing a search. By 10 o'clock, they're draining the pond. I have just never seen...
Wow, that's amazing.
Never seen a city mobilize that fast. Never seen anything like that before. And unfortunately, there's nothing. At 1 a.m., there's still lights from helicopters that are shining, trying to find her in the dark. There's nothing. A few days later, someone finds a pink Winnie the Pooh sweatshirt on Germantown Road. It's, like several miles away. Now, here's the part, just one of the odd parts of the story. Bloodhounds reacted positively to Erica's scent on the clothing, but her family says that was not her shirt. I don't understand. She was reported as having left her home wearing a pink Winnie the Pooh sweatshirt. A pink Winnie the Pooh sweatshirt is found on the road. And yet her family swears that is not her shirt. I don't understand it, except maybe it's just a different style or something than she typically wore. It seems an odd coincidence, but what are you going to say? Her family says it's not hers. You got to believe it's not hers. Her father, Greg, and her mother, Misty, both pass polygraph tests. They are not suspects in her case. It is such an odd thing when they, all police forces, starting with the Kettering, Ohio Police Department, police forces spread out and find a possible of 4 suspects by January of 2000. Now, that's almost a year later, but before that, the things that happen are so different and interesting. One is that the family starts, obviously, a resource center to try and find her, to get tips, and a family member goes to New York to tape Sarah Jessica Parker, who is a Cincinnati native. This family member goes to New York and says, would you record a PSA saying, help us find Erica? And she records it while sitting in the dressing room of the the Late Show with David Letterman. She's, at the Ed Sullivan Theater in her dressing room, and she's about to go tape an episode of, the David Letterman show. And she says, I'm here to talk about a little girl that's missing, a young child, Erica Nicole Baker. We need your help to find her. We're not asking you to form a search party, but we're asking you to keep an eye out for her. And it was just, an amazing thing. This family friend, Barbara Schmidt, said, she did such a great job. I can't look at the script of what she said without crying.
Wow.
And wow. It's beautiful. And they played it on radio. They played it on television. I haven't heard about that much until the Vanessa Guillon case, where Salma Hayek, shows up for her when she was missing. I thought this was a lovely thing because Sarah Jessica Parker was, a native of the area. I just thought it was a lovely thing that she would do this. I guess they'd reached out to quite a few celebrities, and she was the one that responded. So that's kind of a beautiful thing. 6 months later, there is a benefit concert to keep funding for the resource center. And it's held by a group called VETZ, VETTZ. And it's Vietnam vets who are musicians. And the members are from little areas around Kettering. They're from Middletown, Franklin, Dayton, Cincinnati. And while they're doing this concert, which was pretty, I guess it was over 90 degrees, it was pretty hot, and it was at the Kettering Resource Center. They set up a stage and they played, some songs that they had written. One of the most beautiful things about this group is these are Vietnam vets, and they use the same slogan for the concerts they put on for missing kids, which is "You Are Not Forgotten." And it's the same slogan that they use to promote awareness of soldiers that are still missing in Vietnam.
Pretty wonderful.
For prisoners of war. It's incredibly, beautiful. And, Erica's dad says, we're fighting a different kind of war here in the United States. It's a war of how to keep our children from being snatched away. And we don't want other families to go through what we've gone through. And that's a pretty beautiful thing for a guy who feels that he didn't have a lot of options in life because of his lack of education. He still is a really wonderful spokesperson for his daughter's case. So they're getting thousands of tips. She's such a beautiful young girl. She's easy to spot. And they're getting thousands of tips of where, she could be, what could have happened, who might have her. There's a $20,000 reward for, her return. I mean, it's a lot going on. So in February of 2004, 3 days before the statute of limitation on the offenses would have expired, the offenses being child endangerment, kidnapping of a child, a man named Christian John Gabriel was indicted for evidence tampering and gross abuse of a corpse in connection with Erica's case. Now, his girlfriend, who was married to someone else, and another man have all been under the radar after the 4 different suspects sort of didn't pan out that were all child molesters around the area: Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati. The 4 suspects they had turned out to have alibis. Now, Christian Gabriel is problematic at best. I don't really know how else to say it. He is one of the more problematic perpetrators I've ever heard of in my life. I mean, I don't really know. I don't know how to say this, except it's so difficult to believe anything he says because of the amount of lying that he does, the way he changes his story. He doesn't appear to have a mental deficiency, so I don't know if it's just he wants to be involved in the case, he doesn't want to be involved in the case. I don't know exactly. I don't know if we'll ever know what happened to Erica, but I do know they're still looking for a couple of witnesses at the Kettering Recreational Center. And if someone hears this, we have the information of where you can call. So Christian John Gabriel confesses, recants, puts himself there, takes himself away. And the case and the story that he says is so difficult to grasp. But right now it's all we have. And it's terrible. So Christian John Gabriel says he's driving around with a woman named Jan Marie Franks, and she's a drug addict, and he's a drug addict and an alcoholic. There's another man named Clifford Butts and his girlfriend in this van. So there are 4 people in this van. He says that they hit Erica Baker, and she was, struck by their van, and that they panicked and disposed of her body. Now, at first he says she's buried at one park, and then he says she's buried at another park. There has been no evidence of her being buried at either place. There's nothing. And they have done numerous searches and digs in the areas that he said she was. They also impounded the van that he said that at one point he said he was driving. At another point he said Jan Marie Franks was driving. At another point he said Clifford Butts was driving.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah. And there's no evidence that Erica had been hit by the van. They sold the van pretty quickly, which, drug addicts might do just to get more money. It doesn't mean that, that they killed her. I don't know what would possess someone to do this. But, at first he said they buried her at Cedar Creek State Park. And then he said they buried her at a dam. And again, they cannot find any anything at all that she was ever there or that he had anything to do with it. He said that he and Jan Marie Franks, who again was married, were in the van together. They were drunk and high. Now, part of this story is true. He said they'd been shoplifting from the Meijer store in the area. And there's actually proof that they were shoplifting from the Meijer store. And he said they were, leaving in a hurry with their stolen objects and hit her accidentally. And he has, led authorities to all these different places, but there's just not a damn thing that, says that she was ever there. There's nothing of her remains. Nothing. No more evidence. No nothing.
Well, and I just want to make sure that he was convicted of something, though?
Yes. He pled not guilty to the charges of murder. He keeps maintaining his innocence, and he said that his confession was completely untrue, and he made statements because he was being pressured by the authorities. But in October of 2005, he's sentenced to a maximum of 6 years, and he was released from custody, unfortunately, in June of 2011. So he was convicted of, I'll find the exact charges, like gross abuse of a corpse and for involvement in hiding a crime. I can't think of the exact wording. I'll find it for you.
Sure.
But yeah, so 5 years on one charge and 1 year on the other. So he spent his entire term of 6 years in prison.
Did they convict him on just his confession on hitting her with the van and hiding the body?
Well, I guess that's a really good question, Producer Mark. I can't put myself in the mind of the jurors, but I can tell you that I don't know that this man deserves it, but he had a court-appointed attorney that fought the fuck for him, and they appealed his conviction. It was overturned in 2007, but so he was sentenced to 5 years for tampering with evidence and then 1 year for gross abuse of a corpse. And the gross abuse of a corpse is sort of an odd wording, meaning that you may not be responsible for someone's death, but you have either moved a body or done something to a body that would outrage society.
Yeah.
So they're saying burying her at the park or burying her at the dam, So he's saying that, it was an accident. We panicked, blah, blah, blah. These witnesses said we saw Erica and the dog together walking around the park. We paid more attention to Erica because she was so cute. We didn't notice exactly what kind of dog we were walking our dogs to. When we find the dog shivering alone attached to its leash, we did not put two and two together that it was the beautiful little girl with the pink raincoat walking the dog until we saw the news report that she was missing. So we then come forward and say, this is what happened. They didn't see the van. They didn't see anything happen to her. It was just like, poof.
I don't understand how they convicted him. If they didn't find a body. They don't have any witnesses that saw the incident. What did they convict him on? Just the fact that he said that he did it?
I guess his confession. I mean, the fact that he, recants the confession. There are so, unfortunately or fortunately, so many instances of him talking about this and confessing, which is another to so many cops, to so many people in law enforcement.
Yeah.
So many times. I mean, it's,
He kind of buried himself there.
It's very, this is why he's problematic at best. I don't know how else to describe this. And I don't know that he had anything to do with it, but why he would say this other than maybe a drug-addled brain and wanting to be involved in something, I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe it's true. Maybe what he said is true.
Or maybe it's true. So, he does, get indicted on the robbery from the Meijer store on February 7th. During an interview on that crime, he's like, something could have happened when we were driving the van back to my house. Okay. We could have hit a little girl and panicked. Okay. I was driving. Okay. Jan was driving. Okay.
Yeah, that's what
Clifford
I mean.
Butts was driving.
Come on.
Right. So, in one of his statements in 2004, he is charged. It's kind of interesting. He's charged with receiving stolen property, which he actually did get convicted of. So he said he was a passenger in the van that struck Erica. And then, he said Jan was driving when they left the Meijer store. And he said that Jan hit Erica and that the others put her body in the van and he just sat in the back seat. He said that they then went to his apartment and they smoked more crack. Then they drove Erica to Huffman Dam and the others buried her. So he enjoys being involved and then stepping back and saying, I'm not involved, and being somewhat involved and then stepping back. He said, I wanted to take her to the hospital. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So they have, over the years, they have dug in so many different areas, all the areas that he said she was. And all of the, police officers that have heard things, that have, said, you need to talk about this. You need to tell someone. There's zero evidence. And that doesn't mean that he isn't involved, but this is just, the legal ramifications of this case are very overwhelming. So in April of 2005, Christian Gabriel files a motion to suppress all of his statements that he made to the police and any physical evidence, which there really isn't much, that's been seized by law enforcement. Now, the court overrules that on July 15th of 2005. They're like, no, sorry, you can't. In September of 2005, he files a motion for a change of venue, saying that he can't get a fair trial because of the publicity in the newspapers and on television. Yeah, that's probably true. Tough shit. So the court, unfortunately, for him, denies his motion to change the venue. So he's tried before a jury and he's convicted of both of the counts. And it could just be emotion, but, both of these counts based on, I guess, his confessions, like producer Mark is asking, they sentence him to an aggregate term of 6 years for both offenses. So he, files an appeal. My statements were coerced by law enforcement. They didn't make their case. He has a whole lot he has 7 assignments in this, the state versus Gabriel in his, it was submitted to the Court of Appeals of Ohio, the 2nd District of Montgomery County. It was, and the decision came in 2007 and it was overruled. I mean, he says that, he was escorted to the sheriff's office, numerous times. He had been questioned so many times, and every single time it is, confirmed. They read him his Miranda rights and he waived them. He says, you know what? The Kettering Police Department is just messing with me. They've been screwing with me over this whole Erica Baker case. Well, yeah, because you confessed that you were either driving or a passenger in a van that struck her. So at one point, he is brought in for questioning and steps outside to have a cigarette. He has never been handcuffed. He has never been denied, food, water, or the restroom. And he goes outside to smoke a cigarette. And he's, of course, there's a deputy standing there. And, he's like, I probably was a passenger in that van that struck that little girl. Now, this is 2005. Right. And, the deputy says, you know what? I can tell by your demeanor that you're getting something off your chest and you've had it on your chest for a long time. When you go upstairs, you need to tell them what's going on and get this out in the open and get it over with. So he goes back upstairs. He's questioned. And then he says, oh, you know what? We buried her at Huffman Dam. They spend 2 days. They take him there and spend 2 days digging at something that isn't there. I mean, he's so, I don't know what else to say except problematic. He's so problematic. He has taken them to where he says they've buried her several times, many times in 2 different areas. And there's just absolutely nothing that says she was there.
He's an addled crack addict,
Right. So, there's no evidence that any of the interviews were long or threatening or abusive, and there's no evidence that, that he was denied anything. They were all during the daylight hours. There's just nothing to say that the police beat something out of him. And it probably would be difficult for them to not, in my mind. One of the lead investigators, Detective Green, said that, on January 12th of 2005, he said, here's where she's buried at Huffman Dam. And he offhandedly says, you know what, Christian, this doesn't really make sense. There was a high water level at that time, and we would have been able to, find where you buried her after the water receded. So then he's like, oh, you know what? That's probably not true. Now, even the court says, we get that them questioning him and his story after so many different stories may have made him provide a different account, but that was not unduly coercive. That was not pushed out of him. So that's one of the reasons that they discount, his statements, and that they were all made voluntarily under the due process clause. And they're like, you know what? We're going to uphold this conviction. We're going to fucking uphold this conviction. It's ridiculous that he inserted himself, no matter what was happening in Erica's life, her mom had gone through rehab. Her mom was clean. Her dad loved her. Her mom loved her. Her aunt loved her. Her older brothers loved her. It's not that she walked away. She was intelligent. She knew her address, her phone number, how to use a telephone. She could read and write. She would absolutely be able to say, take me home. No one was found injured by a car accident that, was in a coma. It's none of the things that they said would have made any sense. None of the things that, these defendants said, and who knows what happened in that van, if anything. Maybe he imagined it on a drug-addled binge. I don't know. So Christian Gabriel being problematic is one thing, and the other participants being problematic is another. The female that he mentions being with, Jan Marie Franks, was a drug addict, and he at times said she was driving the van and said he was driving the van, but he said that now that she was driving the van. She died in 2001 of a drug overdose. Her court-appointed attorney, I will say I've never heard of anything quite like this, Beth Lewis, will not tell the police anything that Franks told her about Erica's case. She cites, of course, attorney-client confidentiality. So Ohio law states that a dead person's spouse can waive attorney-client confidentiality for them, and Jan Marie Frank's husband did so. But Beth Lewis, the attorney, disputes Jan Marie Frank's husband's authority to waive the confidentiality and is still refusing to answer questions in spite of being held in contempt of court, and she was jailed.
Wow, that's weird.
She spent like 6 months in jail for contempt to not tell her story of a dead client who died of an overdose in potentially the accidental or not accidental murder and, hiding of a child.
And she spent the 6 months in jail, but she still didn't cough up any information.
Not a word.
That's, what that says? I mean, that says that she thinks that her life is in danger if she does. That's what it says to me.
By who?
Who knows? That means that something's going on that's bigger than this case, maybe. Or this attorney is just out of her mind.
Well, I've really never heard of anything. I really have not heard of anything like that.
No, me either. I've never heard anything like that.
Erica's mother, Misty, says, there comes a point in time when you've got to do the right thing. And if she doesn't know anything, then say so. But I don't think that's the case. And maybe what you're saying, Producer Mark, is right. Maybe Beth Lewis is afraid for her life. but I don't know from who.
Yeah, that's a real mystery in this.
Well, there's so many mysteries in Erica's case. It's so uncomfortable in so many ways. I can't tell if Christian Gabriel has just muddied the waters to the point that he's made everything worse, or if what he's saying, in a lot of these stories, there's a kernel of truth. Maybe the kernel of truth is just that they were robbing the Meijer store, but maybe there's a bigger kernel that something did happen and whoever was driving that van did hit Erica. Maybe they did panic, but finding no trace of her is beyond troubling, and no one really paying for what happened other than Jan Marie Franks dying of an overdose, and that's her own doing, and Christian Gabriel spending 6 years in prison on, charges related to her disappearance. It's not enough. It's definitely not enough for Misty, and it's definitely not enough for Greg, Erica's parents, and her brothers. It's not enough. They said that, the little Shih Tzu that was her aunt's dog, she loved it very much and would never have left it. She covered the dog with her raincoat so that it didn't get wet. And then when the dog is found, in a very short amount of time, the dog is soaking wet and shivering because something happened and Erica disappeared. It's just, all of this is so overwhelming and heartbreaking. And, the anniversary is coming up. The next anniversary is coming up, and it's heartbreaking. And this case has had such long tentacles, let's just say that. It's obviously it has changed investigators over the years. You can't have a case this long without, having different people involved. One of the cold case detectives from Kettering, Sergeant Bob Green, he was the lead investigator on Erica's case for many years. And he, would sit up at night going over the case, trying to think of what did he miss? What did he miss? And one year he's on vacation in Hilton Head with his children. And he goes through a McDonald's drive-thru and he looks up and on the window is a poster of Erica who's missing. And he sits in his car and he cries. And he says, I'm here, I'm trying to relax. And it's like she's tapping me on the shoulder and she's saying, I'm still here. Please don't forget about me.
Wow.
So this case, talk about long-reaching tentacles. And they are looking for two witnesses, an older man walking a dog and a long black trench coat because it was cold and rainy, and a younger woman who was jogging around the pond at the Kettering Recreational Center with a white shirt, black pants, black sneakers, and her hair pulled into a bun. And I know this is a long time ago. This is, we're coming up on 22 years. Christian Gabriel was released in June of 2011, and he has not said anything that has led to any indication of where Erica really could be, what really happened to Erica, and law enforcement truly believe that foul play was involved, that she didn't just walk away. If you know anything about Erica Nicole Baker, about this situation, about what could have happened, please call the Kettering Police Department at 937-296-2555. And more cowbell.
If you would like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/just the Tip-Sters.